All of the negative programming and things that we've learned to interpret of ourselves, and that creates a lot of the anger and the agitation and the intensity of how we think and how we respond to people. Yes, it's definitely possible to be strong and empathetic. So what's up? What we talking about today?
Man, okay, so today we're going to delve into some really deep stuff. We are going to talk about, so I consider us both, what a person could describe as strong Black women, like that, whatever you embody or whatever a person embodies to be a strong Black woman, I consider us that. I mean, we out here, with careers, we have, families, and we're making it happen, and so, but there's also, when you hear that term, I think some people can have a connotation or can associate kind of difficult or not agreeable or, even mean or angry with that same embodiment, that same person. So I think we should kick it off with, can you be a strong Black woman and also be a team player, also keep your empathy? How does a person marry those two?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think it's a challenge that I think that many of us have, because the spaces that we move in are not always 100% accepting of who we are at baseline, who we feel like we are. I think most of us sort of grew up with at least some version of, you have to wear two hats, you have to work, double time,
Yep.
2 times harder to get the same results. And just having the expectation that when we are being our full selves and speaking our mind, that someone is going to be sensitive about what our mind has to say.
Well, and don't you sometimes feel like we come from a place where you almost have to defend every step, right? Like you have to almost be like, have a conviction about whatever you want to do, because there are people almost around every corner telling you may not be able to do that.
I mean, absolutely, you do. I think it's really one of the tragedies of the way our society is set up, is that most people grow up and they're bound to hear someone tell them that they can't do something based on some superficial criteria or some like historical data, like, oh, it hasn't been done before, it hasn't been done that much, or you're a girl, or you're not this enough, or you're not that enough. And those messages are inherently traumatic, because if you have someone who is driven and who desires to be great at something, if you teach that person to just put their mind on that thing and go, and make the moves that will get them to where they want to go, implanting deep belief in themselves is the primary thing that gets people to where it is that they have to go. Trust me, it can get people into places that they probably don't even need to be. Just having a deep belief in themselves, right?
I can think of a couple. I'm not gonna go there.
The concept of how much we're told to be smaller, or to be less, or to be quieter, or to be something other than how we feel, that is an invisible wall that many people have smacked up against so many times, that you find yourself being louder. I think one of the things that's interesting to me about the psychology of trauma in Black women is, they talk about us being loud and verbal and just like, hey, whatever, all this talk and attitude. But I think about how when you have consistently negative messages coming from your environment, your surrounding, just being able to be successful at something, you have to find something in yourself to that drives you. And it doesn't always come with self-love. I mean, a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of people look in the mirror and they're their own worst critic. They're RAS, I talk about that reticular activating system, that filter. Their mind goes straight to the negative stuff, straight to the things. Oh, my daddy's ears, and that's, I got my uncle's big head, or whatever. All of the negative programming and things that we've learned to interpret of ourselves. And that creates a lot of the anger and the agitation and the intensity of how we think and how we respond to people. So, all of that is a long answer to say, yes, it's definitely possible to be strong and empathetic. And what I mean by that is what I found when I went through my process over the last few years and realized, like, wow, I didn't realize how much trauma I had been through. And I was a trauma specialist, right? So that's crazy, in a way, to not even have known, because no one had ever taught me or validated that those experiences that I had were traumatic. They clearly were, but I hadn't registered that those things had shaped the way that I thought and the way that I reacted and the way that I felt. And so when I really started making myself look at things objectively and really like take out the layer of red, negative, stinking thinking that had been handed to me by people who really, I don't think, knew better. I think about how much trauma my ancestors went through, living and deceased, and the way that we've been taught to communicate in our society is harsh, and it doesn't take into account how other people feel. So
it's harsh and it's defensive. It's like that. Yeah. There's a real fine line between acknowledging somebody else and defending yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when you start to understand the internal mechanisms, like when someone says something that you don't like or you don't agree with, it's not about whether it's true or not in shared reality, right? That's okay. I get it.
I told you what it's going to be.
That's the beauty of this, because we understand.
It's outside. We do understand. Can you go outside and get it? It's probably outside. Okay. Girl.
Listen.
We gonna get this lesson.
Look, that was time for the choir. The choir.
You know what I mean? The Lord was like, "Nope, you gonna get this blessing. She gonna find the shovel. Don't worry."
But I think all together, I believe that learning how to communicate effectively when we're feeling agitated, because what often happens is that in the workplace environment, when we're trying to express things, if somebody says something that we don't like, everyone gets defensive. That amygdala gets to going, and the mind is like, what? No, I don't like this, and that internal process has consequences for how people respond, how people talk, the way that you say something. So my challenge to people is always about, there's always better words that you can find. That's I very rarely use the terms always and never, because most of the time when you're thinking in extremes, you're speaking a falsehood. So there's
that's deep.
There's that.
Yeah.
So I listen really carefully to those things, but I can genuinely say that there's always words that you can find that help the other person understand you more clearly. There's always a tone that you can deliver those words in that's more effective than what you otherwise would have done if you
whatever your amygdala would have said. Girl, I know about the amygdala now and learned. Hallelujah.
Exactly. Yes. So tell me, what have you learned about the amygdala? The teacher, teach.
So as a student, I'm one of the students of my dear friend, Dr. Alauna. My child is a student of me. What do you want? So I can let a message out. So I can speak to the people.
Tell the world.
And not say this, but
can we do it a little bit later? Mm-hmm. Thank you, buddy. Can you hang out with Raymond for a little bit, or Eddie?
Let me have the phone.
That's true. He's not gonna let her have the phone. So what I've learned about the amygdala is that, you remember the phrase, and I never believed this phrase, but it's relevant. What comes up comes out. It's relevant in this concept, because I never believed that because I'm like, we always have control over what we say. You know, I'm not going to just up and curse you out and then be like, oh, my bad. You know, like that's not how we behave. But you don't have to curse somebody out to react inappropriately. You know, you don't have to call somebody outside their name to mess up somebody in their head by what you said, you know, or how you said it or how you reacted. And so I've learned, you know, we have a choice. You know, you can choose to let whatever comes up come out, however that is, whether it's like egregious or completely like crude or not. And you can also choose to have no friends or no healthy, positive relationships, or to raise your children with a continued cycle of trauma. Or you can choose to pause and to think and to reflect, you know. And I forget you don't have to break down the algorithm, or maybe you don't want to give away your secrets, but I feel like it, or was it not an algorithm? What's it called? Acronym.
The acronym.
Yeah, but
I love the acronym. I don't mind giving it away.
I was taking notes on the acronym because I feel like sometimes the first thing I want to say or the first thing I want to do is not the healthy thing for the situation. You know what I mean? And I'm quick. I'm quick to pop off, you know, and not, like I said, I'm not somebody who's gonna curse you out. I'm not that person. But I am gonna tell you how I feel, and it may or may not come over very nicely. So I've been learning. I've been a school girl.
Like that's right here. You be like, ooh,
I've been a school girl.
Catch it, pull it
You
back.
know what I mean? You know, I'm right trash. But for a purpose, you know. It's for not only the other person or the other people, but it's for myself, because the less strife, the less, you know, tension in my life, the more emotionally healthy I am too, you know, and calm and not on edge. So there's so many ways that can understanding that amygdala, understanding the impulse, and how that can help you to reframe.
Yes, wrestle it. I'll
be in there in my brain like this. Don't you, girl? You better stop it. But you girls, I'll be in my brain, man. I'll be in my brain fight.
Listen, I love it, and I'm happy to hear it. And I tell you, I do the same thing. Every day it's a wrestling of my amygdala and a wrestling of how I'm thinking about a thing and what I'm telling myself about it, and how do I allow that thing to, how much space do I give it, how much do I empower it, and when I catch it, change it, you know. And that's the beauty of even what we start off talking about before we go to our next question. But just, you know, even the idea of being a strong woman, you know, that could be toxic, you know. That concept can be toxic. What do you think about like the whole having to be strong all the time?
Having to be strong. I mean, it also comes down to like, what's the converse or what's the opposite side, strong or weak? Right? It's as though there's only two ways to be.
Right.
You're either strong or you're weak, and you don't want to be weak, you know. But that's a falsehood too, because like you said, when you're speaking in extremes, you're probably speaking a falsehood. There's a wide range of personality traits and of convictions or you know, your ability to mend and mold. And I grew up, you know, talking about just learning to control this amygdala, but even just learning how to understand my strength. Right. I grew up in a household where my mother stayed at home for most of my childhood, although she did end up going to work. But my father worked outside the home, and he was very dominant. And I'm very much like my father. Very dominant, never abusive, as much as like whatever he said pretty much went. And then they would kind of bicker about stuff, but whatever he said pretty much went. And there was one way to do things in my house. There was one way. It was either that way or it was the wrong way. So even learning to be an adult and learning to work with people, whether at work or at home, and if somebody had a different way of doing something, it's like, well, that's wrong. That ain't how you do that. That's not how they're supposed to go. And it's like, that's not true. Like, there are actually multiple ways to accomplish the same goal, you know, and maybe some are better than others, but even that is like better to who, you know. But I've been learning as an adult, even before your course, like there's so much gray area between quote unquote right and wrong. But also like, you know, strength versus weakness. It's like, I can be strong and not say a word.
Mhm.
Honestly, like I don't have to be, showing my strength card every,
Yeah.
every decision. Girl, I got this. What you not gonna do? What I do have to say what you're not gonna do. But I don't have to do that every time. I can just be, and I can believe how whatever I believe, I can, do the best that I can, and then the rest just is.
Well, I actually, even the concept that showing emotions or having them makes you weak, I think is such a, I really think it's the opposite. Having emotions, understanding the language of the soul, at least allowing yourself to acknowledge them and have them, certainly is a huge roller coaster. However, it's superpower because there's a level of awareness that is present that we have been operating under society that's structured under a male psyche.